Hello, everybody. This is Jay Baker in Seattle, Washington, and I'm just been thinking of some ideas for next week's talk. And one of the things I was thinking about was this idea. I got up and wrote in my little book last night. This idea of being kind of compelled to forgive. How peace and grace have to be part of justice. So does there needs to be some sort of restorative act involved. And we talk a lot about disagreeing well and coming together and divided people. And I was thinking of this example last night. Often we'll see things on the news where people meet with someone who's killed a loved one, or there was a drunk driver who killed a family's child, and the family sometimes will go and meet with that person and be compelled to forgive that person, to let them know they're forgiven, even though they're not asking for it. I've seen this. It usually gets on the news because it seems so miraculous. It seems like a miracle. Or you've seen a court case where people get to talk to the person who victimized them and they forgive them. And there's some people who are just so compelled by grace that they have this moment of peace, this moment of forgiveness, and they feel compelled to share it with them. And there's some sort of justice in that, or grace, if you will. As Paul Tillich talks about grace as reunion. Sin is separation, but grace is reunion. And this it becomes so powerful. This moment of peace, this moment of grace becomes so powerful that they literally have to share it with the least of these, with the person who's hurt them the most, with their enemy. And I think there's something really powerful in that. And so often when we do talk about disagreeing well, the idea of that is not to be disagreeing. The idea on that is that it leads to a type of restoration, that it leads to an understanding, that it lessens that which separates us, that divides us, that divide that's often in the middle, whether it be politics or theology or religion, these type of things. That's why we have hard conversations with the hope of healing, with the hope of restoration, with the hope of moving on. But we're not always ready for that. Sometimes our anger is too great, our hurt is too great, or sometimes the hurt is on the other person. I often see when these people forgive people, the person doesn't say anything or they don't care. But grace becomes this really powerful two-way street where it just has to sit with that person who's been forgiven, who didn't even ask for forgiveness. It reminds me of Christ on the cross when he says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." It's just bestowed upon this person to sit with and to examine and to look at. And for us, this other street that comes back of justice, this other street of grace that comes back to us, that causes us to think deeper about it, to grow more into it, and to find this place of peace. It also reminds me of when my family found out that Jerry Falwell had passed away. We were all sitting at dinner, and we all had different reactions, but I remember my mother just started crying. She just wept. And I remember how powerful that was, because here was this man who had this hugely negative effect on our family, really hurt our family. But it was almost like when David wept over Saul's death. This idea that there were so many complex feelings, there were so many contradictions within everything within that human being, that my mom cried for him. She cried for all different reasons. I think even for the fact that he never got restored, that he never understood love, that he never really understood grace, even though he was a pastor. So there's really can be beauty in things like that. And so that's often what we're trying to talk about, is how do we always remember that there's justice within this, and that we don't let our hurt lash out at people. Sometimes I had an argument once with someone, and they were accusing me of living in a poor neighborhood, and they were saying, "Well, you're just doing that to show off. You're just doing that to virtue signal." I'm like, "No, I can only afford to live here." And I got really angry with them. Well, to find out later that I was talking to this person online, and this person was a pastor. I didn't even realize that this person was a female pastor. But later she said, "Well, I'm a female pastor, and sometimes I get really angry with the way that people talk to me, or how male pastors speak to me." And I realized that she was carrying a burden with her and a hurt with her that had nothing to do with our conversation. And she goes, "Well, and I said, listen, I was just talking to you as anybody who would accuse me of something that wasn't true. And I said, I didn't, your picture is something else. Your name is not even your name. So I didn't even know that you were a female." But we were able to have this conversation, and realize that there was other anger there. So sometimes we've got to deal with ourselves. We've got to make sure that we're healed, that we've got to deal with our own pain, and almost have a reunion with ourselves and a healing for ourselves before we can do this work of peace work, this peacemaking or work of restorative justice or restoration. That we're not bringing something else to the table. And I think it's also important to realize when we see that in others, that there's just some people who are just not quite there yet, and that we need to learn to be patient and kind with that. And by showing grace and by showing love, we might be able to have the conversation that needs to happen, that leads to healing, that leads to more conversations. So that's what I'm thinking about for Sunday. And I hope that encourages you today to just kind of to think about that respect of grace and forgiveness and how that moves within the person who receives it, but also it's a gift for the person who's able to give it as well. It's like the mysteries of grace. All right, thanks a lot. Have a great week. Hopefully we'll see you this Sunday on YouTube at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time live. Bye-bye.